Welcome, IT changemakers, to the Dex Show with Tim Flower and Tom McGraw. Let's get into it.
Hello, changemakers. Tim and I are back together on the show once again. How you doing, Tim?
I'm good, Tom. Yeah, we're just catching up a little bit on some PTO time we each had, and we're recording this on a Monday, so back in the saddle. So it's good to reconnect with you.
I'm recording this from Ireland. I kept calling it Ireland for ages, and then everyone would say, "Which island are you going to?" Okay, Ireland. You got to add the extra subtle syllable in the middle, and I got it. I got us to a shout out, Tim, to friend of the show, Sarah.
Yeah, I saw some pictures.
Who's facilitated many wonderful guests that we've had on the show, and I know he's a listener because every now and then she says, "Oh, I like the episode you just did," and so hopefully she's listening to this one because we've got to congratulate her on her wonderful wedding in West Cork. Beautiful occasion, beautiful hotel, beautiful landscape, and beautiful weather, which is anyone who's been to West Cork knows is not a common occurrence. So big shout out to Sarah and Mark, her husband. So today, onto our guest, Tim. We're joined by someone who's been at the forefront of exploring how AI is reshaping the world of work, which is something we do here quite often, of course. But this gentleman, Ben Eubanks, he does it from the perspective of HR. So very, very excited to talk to him. Ben is the Chief Research Officer at Lighthouse Research and Advisory. And a decorated and celebrated author and podcaster and public speaker. And we're just excited to talk to you, Ben. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, Tom. Glad to be here. And if you asked me how we say it here in the southern U.S., it's island. So that would have been really easy for telling them.
But what if it's an island, Ben? What do you call
Ireland? Maybe.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Let's move on, listener, shall we? Already. Well, look, Ben, so excited to talk to you. Big fan of your work. You bring a very, very fresh perspective to something we spend a lot of time thinking about and talking about here on the Deck Show. Hey, look, it's obvious to say, like in IT, like anything, AI is going to have like in IT specifically, rather, AI is going to have a dual impact on HR. Because on the one hand, it's going to change how HR carries out its own work. On the other hand, it has to reshape HR's outward-facing role in the business, right? It's going to influence HR's own strategy at the very highest level. Could you maybe update our audience, who isn't your typical HR audience, on what's most significant in these different dimensions of change?
The very first three words you said there in that question, I think really tell it. It's like in IT, right? IT work is divided too between these very compliance focused, very process like checklist sorts of things, and other things that are high level strategy and impact. And what does this mean and unlock for us in terms of opportunity? And so for me, the perspective is HR is divided the same way. We have this compliance piece, this checklist piece, checking it off, just moving along the list. We also have the strategy side of it. I was talking to a leader of people analytics for a large bank recently, and he was telling me he's getting pressured to adopt AI. And he said, they're telling me to do it around our employee service delivery and how people answer questions. I'm like, yeah, there's some good stuff there. There's also an opportunity here on the strategy side where you can answer questions about how we can grow our talent, how we can meet that business objective, how we can meet this need. And so there's this sort of bifurcation there between the two different lenses of how that goes. And I think it's not dissimilar from how IT sees that, but doing the compliance things well may get you a little applause. But unlocking the strategy and opportunity is where the real competitive advantage comes from for employers.
When you think about previous waves of digital transformation that you've witnessed and thought about and analyzed, and how they affected HR strategically, what lessons, first of all, do you feel do apply to this coming wave of AI-driven digital transformation? And where exactly do you think the lessons of the past fall short? In which ways do you see AI transformation as something that's truly uncharted and, if you will, unprecedented, if at all?
If at all. Oh my goodness.
If at all. Some might say not. So
There's this AI thing you might have heard of. No, so I'll start with this. So when I was writing the book Artificial Intelligence for HR, and the second edition and the third edition, I kept going back to the research I could find, anything old or new that highlighted what happens to work when this evolution comes through and automation strips away things. And again, hundreds of years ago, mechanical automation, suddenly farming is easier. Great. Okay. But today it's digital automation. It's changing the work that we do. It's taking pieces out that we had to do manually before and makes it easier for us. That automation component there is great. That's been a thing for a long time. AI changes that because it's not just about automating something we've done, but it's about accelerating things, augmenting things, adapting work itself. We are having to redefine how work gets done because some things no longer have to be done by a human. And in some cases, we're all just, thank goodness, like put our feet up and rest for a moment. But in other cases, we're saying, now what does this make possible? What can I do now that I couldn't do before because I was too busy just churning away at these other tasks and things? I think that's the real opportunity that we have now in front of us, is to rethink that and what's possible. I think that's the big thing. It's not just about doing other stuff faster, but giving us new things we can do that in the past were just beyond our reach.
And so, Ben, I'll add my excitement to having you on the show. We've talked about this linkage between HR and IT for a while, and having you here to share some of your research and the lessons out of your books, I think is going to be real big for the audience. So, welcome. We've known for years now that AI holds this tremendous promise for all sorts of enterprises. But what do you see are the biggest risks with AI in the workplace, both in terms of culture? So I'll lay out a couple here and get my thoughts out. Um, there's this tremendous promise, but there are also angles where it can be demonized. How dare you use AI to create your content? And there's actually AI to detect whether or not you used AI. And now there's AI to make my AI production more human, so you can't detect it. Right? There's this back and forth swing on whether it's good or whether it's bad. And I'm starting to sense some of this internal HR kind of responsibility to manage the human competition in an enterprise. So, what role does HR play in anticipating and managing and hopefully mitigating some of these back and forth plays in their own enterprise?
Well, if I could snap my fingers and every organization had access to the same AI tools, the only differentiator would be their talent, your people,
Right.
what they can do, what they know, and how they do it. I think that's the real thing. And so there are some very real risks that are there. Everybody wanted to start out with bias and all the pieces of that. And to me, like, what's interesting is, yes, AI could be biased if it's programmed that way, if it's the data is trained on or biased, yes. But also I can actually audit that. I can't audit that manager in my business who is always saying, you know what, I'd like to, I just can't hire a woman for my team. I just can't, they can't cut it. And I can't audit that manager has something going on in his head that's, shutting that down. I don't know. The AI, I can audit and say, hey, look, it's looking at these indicators. It's turning them down because they're women. We can fix that and change that. So I think that's the bias piece. Yes, it's a risk, but it's also auditable and changeable in a way that it's not possible with humans. So for me, that's a risk, but not the full stop, nothing goes forward. We all have to be pulling our hair out and screaming and running in circles kind of risk. The other one that gets me, though, the one that's come out more recently, there was a study by the University of Toronto a little while back, and they looked at humans who were using large language models to do their work and to do some creative tasks. And they gave them an actual assessment, not just some questions, how do you feel, your opinion, but an actual assessment of creativity. And the people who used large language models, ChatGPT and others, to do their work, their creativity was lower than people who did not. And the
Well,
part that's most scary isn't that. It's that when they brought them back a little bit later to test them again, nobody got to use it this time. And that second group who had used ChatGPT, they were still less creative. Their ideas were very narrow, very streamlined, very homogenous is the term they use, where they
mm,
all start to sound the same. But the brainstorming and the creativity from the other group that had not done that, it was broader, more novel ideas, more creativity was actually shown proven in the research. So to me, that's the part that gets me is humans pick the path of least resistance. Our brains are wired to be lazy. And at the same time, going that shortcut route for all of our brainstorming, all of our creative thinking, not just automating the simple tasks, but when we start doing the higher order tasks and using it to outsource our thinking, that's going to start hurting us long term. And that's the risk that I'm most concerned with because it, human behavior is hard to change, guys. It's really hard to change people. And we're wired to take that easy path. So the thing we're going to have to do is very carefully, very intelligently put some limits around when and where those are used and determine which types of work can be done that way and which we need to stay away from because the short-term win is not worth a long-term loss.
Yeah, it's really interesting research. I'll chat with you. Maybe we can put in the speaker notes where folks can get that research because as a semi-creative person myself, I feel like my creative ideas are actually augmented by some AI collaboration, right? And maybe this is collaboration with people versus creative collaboration with AI, but it's a curious take. I do a lot of my creative ideas I feel have really taken off with some of that um, AI back and forth. But I'll ruminate on that a little bit more. But there's strong opinions on both sides, even to take this a step further, that some of this AI capability is actually going to take jobs, and if those jobs
Mhm.
become more siloed, less creative. It's an interesting implication, but we're also at this kind of we're the middle of also some talent scarcity, right? In many areas, that there's an inability to find the right people with the right talents. I'm curious how you reconcile those two conundrums, right? The it's going to take my job, but we don't have the right talent to actually run the AI models. How do you reconcile and see those two things converging in the future?
The first thing I think of is there was a study done by Q Research. I mean, maybe it's probably not 10 years ago, but it's been a while now since the early days of AI being a conversation just in public. And they surveyed American workers that, hey, how do you think that AI is going to change work and change jobs? And it was something like, three-quarters of them said yes. They said, how many of you think it's going to change your job? And you're like, no, no. Generally, people are like, no, it won't change my job, but it's going to change everybody else's. And so our brains have this like hardwired defense mechanism that says, well, this is risky and scary and look, it's right on the horizon, but I'll probably be okay because I know my work and it's just too creative for that. So that's the first place our mind goes. So in the book I wrote, Talent Scarcity, it really looks at some of the reasons that it's hard to find good quality people. You mentioned in some fields, some professions, the lack of skills there is very real. So a couple different things. We're trying to unpack this big question. Number one, AI is taking tasks, not jobs.
Right.
Right now, that's what's happening. So if you have a marketing team and you had a content person that was doing that as part of their tasks, some of the content things they were doing, we can now do like that, snap of a finger with AI. And that person's tasks they were doing all around that, writing, creating, editing, researching, those pieces of their job go away. Now, does the company get rid of that person entirely and offload the rest of their work to other people? Maybe. Or do they somehow streamline that job and change it? It depends on the company, depends on the culture, the budget, all the things. But that's what's really happening. It's the tasks, not the job. Now, that piece of it, let's set that aside for a second. One of the things that concerns me, again, I'm the HR nerd. I'm a data nerd in most rooms. I was almost an economist and decided to go to HR instead. Still a study of human behavior every day. And one of the things that I wrote about in the book is there's this demographic cliff that's out there. And if anyone has heard some of the stories around this, they're pretty much all true. Every developed nation in the world has a birth rate that's below replacement rates.
Mm.
So they are steadily going to be shrinking. And we see this in some countries that are very far down this path, like Japan, where they don't have enough working people to pay for the Social Security to take care of the people who are already at retirement age. And that sort of social structure breakdown is, again, lots of fun reading on the weekends, but it gives you this idea of like there's a lot of fear there. There was a one of the Russian ministers of labor a few years ago was on the news saying, hey, when you get a break from work, go procreate. That was their, like, on the news, they're saying this because they're trying to make sure their citizens are creating enough people because they're worried about that. We're losing people to retirement every day. So it's stretching the workforce. And so that's a real problem. In the book, I talked about how AI, automation, robotics, those sorts of things give us a way to potentially close that gap in some way. But there's a problem with that. When we look at the job growth in the last few quarters, the jobs that are actually out there are standing jobs, not sitting jobs. And AI is really well suited to sitting jobs. Standing jobs, home health. I need a person there checking on someone in person, making sure they're okay. We're building something in a plant. We have things like retail. AI is not doing those types of jobs and it can't right now. So there could be an opportunity for that down the line. But right now, it's really affecting some of those sitting jobs and white collar work and not as much of those standing jobs where we're still trying to hire people, still trying to bring them in, and we still have this shortage. It's a weird sort of labor market issue.
This is bad news for us sitters, Tim.
Yeah, I know. I got to.
All of us are sitting as we're recording.
You know,
So I stand or the rest of this.
Yeah, can I? Is it job security if I push my standing desk to the top and start standing up for the calls?
Yeah.
Definitely. And so a lot of the functions that we talk about here, right? Therapy, finance feedback, any consultative work we've talked about in other shows where knowledge and education are becoming free. So you can find your answers a lot easier. I'm curious, as HR in itself becomes more technical through AI adoption, how do they, as an HR function, avoid losing their core purpose, keeping people at the center of the strategy? What practices or principles help maintain that balance?
So we actually did a piece of research earlier this year, and we surveyed almost 1,000 different organizations across the globe, asking them about their people practices. And I know this is not an HR show, but there's a very good tie into that question where we asked them, what's more important? Is it more important to be data oriented, really thinking about the numbers, the evidence, the metrics, those things? Or is it more important to be people focused? And what we found is a company that picked one of those two things versus the catch-all, the cheat answer, like both are important. If they picked one or the other of those, their results were poorer, their perspectives were more limited, their impact was less. And so those teams that say it's about all the AI is great, let's go do all the things, and we're using that to sacrifice the connection with people, use it to sacrifice the opportunity we have to serve people, those companies may get, again, that short-term gain and look like they're winning and a long-term loss. It reminds me of the Klarna story where they replaced hundreds of their customer service agents with an algorithm, with an AI tool. You're like, look at us, we're great. And then a year later, like, oh yeah, we need people again. And so they learned the hard way. And we're going to see that pendulum swing too far, I think, on the talent side too. And you see that in some cases where, hey, this company automated their whole hiring process. There's not a human to be heard or spoken with or connected to during that process. And when you go and you look on Reddit and these other places, people are like, I will never, ever work at this company because that's terrible. That's horrible. I would need to connect with a human to know if it's the right job for me. So for me, the philosophical breakdown is, do we use the technology to keep people at arm's length? Or do we use the technology to understand more about them so we can serve them more deeply? And for HR people out there who have that heart of service, they care about their teams, I think that's where their strategy is going to lie. Their best opportunity lies is they can now know more about their people, not in the creepy stalker way, but know more about their people. Like, what do they need from us? How do we serve them better? What unique benefits can we offer to Ben's family because they need this thing right now from us versus Tim's family? They need something different.
Mm-hmm.
And that level of understanding and awareness that AI gives us is what's going to set those companies apart that take this in the best positive direction.
Just some free thought based on a reaction, based on some of the commentary. It's not a far stretch. If AI is taking accountability for hiring people, that AI eventually takes accountability for firing people too, right? We're in this, if we don't get a manage on this soon, we're going to be in a tough place. And I think there's enough smart people that are seeing it. It's a matter now, what do we do? And in that regard, who takes accountability for it, right? Corporate functions are very easily siloed off. HR only does HR, IT does IT, procurement does procurement. But the rework, the redesign of work that's AI driven, if a business wants to take on those functions, like you're talking about, of how do we redesign the hiring function without just turning it all over to AI? How do we use AI to redesign that function? It sits squarely in the middle of IT and HR. One silo can't do it alone or without the other. So how do those two functions converge to meet this moment?
I think we arm both sides in a death match and let see who's standing after we're all done. That seems like really easy.
I agree, Ben.
I think a lot of it.
I've been sharpening my battle axe over here, so I'm ready. I'm ready for it.
Someone said it.
It's finally someone. No. So I've always been an advocate that HR and IT need stronger ties. So we did a piece of research a couple of years ago now where we surveyed an audience of HR leaders and IT leaders around some technology implementations relevant to HR tech. But to me, the interesting takeaway overall across the board, every respondent, when we said, is your organization ready for what's next? Are you adaptable? Are you ready for the future? The ones that said yes, we asked them about the technologies and tools they're using to manage their people. How big of a role does that play? 97% of people said it plays a key role in them being agile and responsive as an organization. And to me, that blows me away because statistically that never happens. That's like getting 100 people in a room and saying, what should we eat for lunch? And 97% of people said the same thing. That's ridiculous to even say it out loud, but that happened in the research. So to me, that gives me strong hope that that's possible. The thing that got me though, in the research, we started looking at the two different audiences. When we asked about implementations, IT generally said, hey, listen, we're here. We're ready. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to help out. Whatever you need. We've got this extensive experience. We know what we're doing. Just let us help. And HR's general response in that was, we'll call you if we need you. Strangely enough, later on in the survey, HR is much more likely than IT to say, we see these problems pop up in implementations. We're not sure how to deal with them. And they were unexpected. And so you're like, you've got a great advisor and expert right here saying, let me know when you need help. And you ignore them. And then later on you say, man, I wish I would have gotten some help. So I'm hoping those sorts of messages, those sorts of stories help our friends across the aisle come together, because the opportunity there, when we do see this together, you see organizations that are trying to combine those roles, and whether that's a good decision or not, we can probably debate that. But I do think the opportunity is there. One more thing I'll tell you on that, just to give you a picture of how this could be. So a couple of years ago, when everyone was hiring in a frenzy, you couldn't pay people enough money to get them to come to your organization. It was wild. I put together this panel with a compensation leader and a recruiting leader, because in every conversation I was hearing with recruiting, they're like, comp won't adjust the pay rates and they're out of their minds. What do they think they're doing? We're losing good people. And I thought the comp leaders are saying, what is wrong with the people in recruiting? They don't understand we have budgets. We have to have controls. We have to, be fair. They don't know what's going on. And so each of them was sort of saying the same thing. We want to be competitive. We want to be fair. We want to treat people right. But they were both accountable for different things. They both had different objectives in the moment they were trying to accomplish. But at the end of the day, if I pressed them, they would say, we both want to make sure we're doing the right thing to set us up for success long-term and hiring the best people. And so the same sort of thing there, if we could adapt that to this IT leaders and HR leaders saying, get together with your own counterpart in your own organization, anyone listening to me right now, and talk to them about what they're accountable to, what things they're prioritizing, what they're worried about, because you would be surprised how often something comes across and there's an overlap where you can step in and support and serve and build a bridge versus building a barrier. That's what I think is the real opportunity for us.
So who takes the lead, right? Not just on governance for AI, but all the other operational aspects of this. Does HR report to IT or vice versa? Is it cross-functional body? Is it one leader or organization that owns both? What's the organizational model look like in terms of ownership and leadership?
You see some organizations that are actually hiring someone to lead AI in the business. And I don't think that's a bad thing to do, to have someone with that perspective across all the different disciplines and functions and roles and use cases and opportunities there. Within its own realm, though, HR generally is trying to think about, again, our problems are hiring, retention, benefits, compensation, those sorts of things are priorities for us. IT's problems are not those same problems.
Right.
And so we need some ownership within our space as an HR function. Yes. It's like global governance and local flexibility. That's sort of how I see companies implement policies. Like, here's what it means across the globe, but within your local region, we know that you can't work on this day of the week because of religious holidays. So we'll give you flexibility to accommodate that. And the same thing is true here. We need this big picture vision. We need to get together and say, this is who we want to be. Do we want to be a company that automates all the people roles, gets everybody out of the business, tries to just go straight technology? Or do we want to be those companies that relies on our competitive advantage, which is our people, and we're going to use those as our differentiator? And you said it earlier, we're going to use people to actually create content. What? No, really? Yes. That will be our advantage over someone else, because they're creating things that, again, very narrow, very homogenous. They're all going to start to sound the same. We're going to use our people for the unique stories they can tell, the differentiators, the connections they can make with our audience. And so I think that's the opportunity, really, is, yes, has overarching sort of perspective, whether it is having a person dedicated to it or having a council around that. But within your own disciplines, you're going to have the flexibility, because the problems you're trying to solve day to day are different than the problems trying to be solved from marketing or sales or HR in this case.
And do you think that might be a part of a role for HR as in its management of employer brand? Like, this is the kind of organization where AI is kept at this level. Do you know what I mean? Like, wait, there's a human-centric policy towards hiring, etc. I mean, and how does HR play that role in communicating externally about that brand?
I have actually not thought about that, and I think that's a brilliant question, honestly. You see companies talk about their fair treatment of people. You see companies talking about what it's like to work here. They share all these kind of details transparently in their brand, trying to attract the right people, trying to discourage the people who are like, oh, they work hard. That's a fast pace. I want something slower pace. I'm going to find another company to work for. They're using their brand for those things. I don't think it's a far cry to say we should be talking about how we see AI as a part of the evolving model of work and the evolving nature of work, and say, we expect you to come here and be able to use those things, use it during your hiring process. You're going to be using it at work every day. We want you to push the boundaries of what's possible. Or, hey, we're going to be using this as a tool, just like we would any other tool, email, whatever else. But also, we are going to prioritize and emphasize and lean on the human as the key part of this, because there are things that transparently AI can't do. AI can't take responsibility for things. AI can't build relationships with other people. AI can't mentor others. And those other things that it can't do is where we should be spending more of our time. I've I've had this weird sort of love-hate conversation in the last few years with that discussion around AI being, oh, it'll do all the routine stuff so we can be more strategic. I feel like, well, put my hands on my hips like a superhero pose, strategic. And
That's good.
people have said that so many times, like, what, okay, what do you mean by that? We actually have data. We actually collected data on talent acquisition leaders, people who are responsible for hiring in their businesses, asking them, are you more efficient? Are you using AI? Okay. If so, yes to both of those questions, what are you doing with that freed up time? Are you sitting around playing games on Facebook or watching TikTok videos, or are you doing something useful? And what we find is they're spending more time building relationships with candidates. We talked about this, right? That key connection with a candidate out there, not automating that. They're spending more time building relationships with stakeholders. I've heard IT is a stakeholder of HR and vice versa, right? And they're also spending more time proving to the business the value of what they're doing every day. So they're leaning on those other areas that right now they're like, that's just out of my grasp. I can't reach it. And once they have that time freed up, they lean in. So we have some data around that. And to me, that's encouraging, because I was a little bit skeptical. I was like, we'll be more strategic. Like, what does that even mean? And now I've gotten to the data of proving that, yes, that's happening in this role. And if it's happening here, the opportunities there in other roles as well.
I quite like your contempt for the word strategic, Ben. It is a great hollow word in business speak, isn't it?
Yes. Everybody throws it around. Let's back it up with some proof.
Yeah. So, you use that word homogenization earlier as a potential consequence of lazy or excessive AI use. And it strikes me that danger isn't. I don't know if businesses fully realize the dimensions of that danger and what it could mean for them, right? Like, because what could be worse for a business than being completely homogenized against its competitors? You lose your entire competitive edge. First of all, do you think that that's true? Second of all, does HR's role become therefore more hands on hips strategic?
So let's see. I do believe that if ever, here, I'll give you an experiment. So we were talking with one of our clients. They actually did an experiment across the Fortune 100, looked at all of their career sites, pulled them together, did an analysis of the keywords, how they talked about their cultures, all those things. And what they found was substantially the majority of them, you could have swapped out the logo and it would have all sounded pretty much the same. They all stand for the same things. They all believe the same things. There's no difference between them. And that's not employer branding. That's employer blanding. It all sounds exactly the same. There's no excitement. There's no novelty. There's no reason for me to go work here or there. And we did an experiment. I was speaking at an event for a group in India recently. And I pulled together the age-old debate here in the States, Coke versus Pepsi. And so I grabbed the job from Coke India and Pepsi India, and put them together and showed the different jobs, and was asking the audience, like, which one of these companies would you want to apply for? As I'm going through showing the job postings themselves and no other details from the website, like, you can't even tell 8 clicks in, scrolling endlessly on the Pepsi one, who the company is. It doesn't mention the company. It doesn't tell what they do. You start reading the Coke one and it's in red font. It's got their logo or their colors on it. And it starts talking about, here's how we treat people at Coke. Here's what's important to us at Coca-Cola. And so they're going through those things. That sort of thing is already happening where companies are trying to find ways to stand out. And the best ones are doing a good job of emphasizing that human that makes them unique, that human connection that makes them different than everybody else. So I do think that's an opportunity. And yes, HR has to be playing a role in that. It's not, we sometimes forget that hiring and attraction is not just about pursuing a candidate, but they have to look at us and say, I want what you are offering me. It's not a one-way street. And when you forget that, you think, well, you start to hear things like, well, they should just be lucky we're even considering them. They should be lucky to have a job. And in the real world, those sorts of things don't really fly.
Mm, mm. Okay, last question for you, Ben. Wonderful discussion. But if you look 10 years ahead, if you imagine, close your eyes for us, Ben. Hands on hips, close your eyes. What is the most surprising or underappreciated way that you think AI is going to reshape the world of HR specifically?
I'm going to tell you a quick story, and then I'm going to answer your question with part of that story. So one of my favorite examples to give when I'm speaking is I talk about years ago, I mean, years and years and years ago, there was this fever that was rampaging, and the doctors were trying to figure out how to even diagnose it. They had no clue what to do. And this doctor said, hey, listen, I'm 100%, I can diagnose it every single time. And everybody else was like, the medical profession said, how is this impossible? We can't figure it out. So they all come together. Said, come on over. So they all come over there and they're sitting around there watching this doctor. He's like, here's what I do. Here's how I diagnose it. So he reaches over into the mouth of a person who's infected and he feels their tongue. Okay. And then he reaches over into the mouth of a person who's not sure and he feels their tongue. Immediately thereafter, he's like, yep, this person has it too. And everybody around him says, whoa, that's amazing. We never thought to do that. Looking back now, we know that's ridiculous and terrible as a medical practice. You're giving the other person the disease the second you put your hand in their mouth. But at the time, they thought it was revolutionary and amazing and brilliant that this doctor had discovered a way to do this. I do not want us to end up 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, looking back saying, how did we let AI get to where it was? Talk about that pendulum swing earlier. How do we let it get so far that we can never bring it back to some level, some degree of humanity and connection? Do I think AI is eating some jobs? Yes. Do I think AI is changing the tasks we need to be focusing on at work? Yes. But I really think the biggest thing for me is we have to be intentional. We have to be intelligent. We have to recognize our faults as humans, our reliance on the easy way, the thing we've always known, the way we've always done it. That's our brains are wired and our grooves in our brain are designed to do that and follow that path. We have to do it differently. So for me, the surprising way is that we're going to see all this change and we're going to be surprised by it. That's what I hope doesn't happen as we're thinking about how this reshapes HR and work more broadly. I hope we are more intentional, hands on the wheel, because already the early findings coming out from Harvard and other organizations say that we're perfectly content to let the AI just make decisions on its own when we think it's capable, even when it's not.
So interesting, Ben. I love it. Great perspective. Pleasure talking to you. Do share the link to that research. We're going to put it in the show notes. We'll also put links to your LinkedIn and your books. Anything else you would like to feature here, where people can reach out to you or connect with you, etc.
The best way to find some of the research or send your HR team to find the research is lhra.io. That's the website, and that's where all of our good stuff is shared and published free of charge.
Link to that website in the show notes. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, Ben. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, guys.
To make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a rating of the show. Just tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves. If you'd like to learn more about how NextThink can help you improve your digital employee experience, head over to nextthink.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.